started. My name is Tricia Lauer, and I'm the Vice President of Assessment and Curricular Affairs at the University of Arizona Global Campus. It's a pleasure to be moderating an esteemed panel of colleagues to discuss engaging in the moment, teachable moments, and the culture of care. Our goal with today's presentation is to answer the question of what a culture of care in the classroom looks like in terms of academic integrity and how faculty can support students through teachable moments. In today's panel, you will hear about effective techniques and strategies that faculty members and staff alike can utilize to support students through teachable moments using emails, conversations, feedback on discussions, and written assignments. It's my privilege to introduce the four panelists today. First, Dr. Peggy Sundstrom, who has been a faculty member with the University of Rockies, then Ashford, and now UAGC since 2009, teaching courses in organizational development and leadership and guiding students in the dissertation process. She has served in a variety of roles within the university, including participating in new program design and implementation, curriculum development, and academic governance. Additionally, Dr. Sundstrom is a management consultant to organizations experiencing transition and change. She specializes in strategy and planning, change management, and employee growth and development. Dr. Sundstrom integrates this real-world experience into her teaching by encouraging students to challenge themselves in applying principles, theories, and best practices of organizational leadership. And as lead faculty for the PhD program in organizational development and leadership, she uses her extensive experience in organizational leadership to guide and grow the program. Dr. Sundstrom's research interests are broad and varied. She is interested in how organizations and organizational systems work and how individual performance can be shaped, enhanced, and guided with thoughtful application of coaching, mentoring, and training, along with sound policy and practice at the organizational level. Her dissertation research was a quantitative study using conjoint analysis to evaluate the requirements for graduate housing at the University of California, Los Angeles. The recommendations from her research helped inform an $80 million investment in new facilities for graduate housing at UCLA. Dr. Sundstrom's passion is helping students achieve their personal and academic goals, especially as they enter the dissertation process. She believes in meeting students where they are and offering them the kind of support they need, which varies widely from student to student. Dr. Sundstrom's philosophy is that students own their dissertation process, and she sees her role as guide, mentor, and facilitator of the process. Dr. Nathan Pritz is an award-winning educator, course developer, and faculty mentor with a strong focus on innovation that has practical applications in the classroom. He brings expertise in writing, business communication, advertising and marketing, and online user experience to the general education classroom to maximize student learning and heighten engagement, infusing curriculum with foundational outcomes bolstered by clear ties to a student's academic and career path. A professor in the Academic Engagement Center at the University of Arizona Global Campus, Dr. Pritz is the author and co-author of 12 books, including Decoherence, Film from Watching to Seeing, 3rd edition, Research and Writing, 2nd edition, and Essentials of Academic Writing, 4th edition. He also served as editor and wrote the Introduction for Living Online, a digital fluency handbook. He's building a handbook of the strategies and best practices essential for designing and delivering meaningful learning experiences to students online, one chapter at a time, at www.radical-humanity.carrd.co. Elena Pasquarella works in the Office of Assessment and Curriculum Affairs at the University of Arizona Global Campus. overseeing the implementation of the DEI course audit rubric, academic integrity processes, and serves as a QM coordinator for the university, as well as an Applying the Quality Matters rubric online facilitator. Elena has presented at the IUPUI Assessment Institute on topics pertaining to general education and institutional learning outcomes assessment, as well as DEI curriculum audits. She also has presented at our annual teaching and learning conferences. Christina Jaquez is the Student Conduct Officer and Deputy Title IX Coordinator for UAGC. She has been working in student affairs since 2012 and in higher education since 2006. She has a Bachelor of Science in Communications from the University of California, San Diego, and her Juris Doctorate from Whittier College. She is passionate about helping students grow and be successful in their educational journey while leading with understanding and empathy. She is passionate about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives, and serves on Turn the Tide and the Change Advisory Group. As you can see from the introductions and biographies of our panelists, we're in wonderful company for a panel of learning about how we can infuse culture of care with academic integrity. So I'm pleased to ask the first question of the panel. How does academic integrity look in the culture of care at various touch points in a student's academic journey? Nate, would you like to start?
Sure, thanks. So for those of you who don't know me, I teach in the Academic Engagement Center. That's our grouping of classes that are in the first year sequence, general education courses, meaning that these are the classes students take first in their university experience. And as we know, a lot of our students, these are the first college classes they're taking in a number of years. I guess what I would say as far as academic integrity goes is in the classes that I predominantly teach, English 121, the written comp class, and English 122, the research and writing class, we kind of have these conversations very early, but it's not something that I am necessarily looking to have a gotcha moment with students about. They're not really very familiar with some of these concepts. So we try to look at academic integrity from a more positive standpoint. One of the things students do in English 121 is develop their own narrative as it leads towards their academic and professional goals. It's kind of hard to plagiarize your own personal narrative. And so students are doing a lot of sharing of their own previous experience, building on that to try to create, again, this narrative of what's led them to where they are. Trying to instill this sort of sense of ownership and empowerment in their own knowledge and experience has those hidden benefits of getting them to understand that their own work matters. When we get into English 122, where we start to fold research into the writing process, we do run into problems, right? Students are learning for the first time how to cite things, how to research. Maybe not the first time, but it's one of the first times they're doing it in a formal academic setting, trying to generate formal academic writing. But again, I feel like these are all times when we can have conversations with students about the work they're doing in the classroom. So academic integrity shifts from becoming kind of ownership and empowerment of your own narrative, your own voice, your own story, your own writing, to understanding how other people, other voices, other perspectives, other facts can support and develop and further your own ideas. But in order to do that properly, we need to be able to segment out who said what, where did it come from? And so we have those conversations about proper citation. It's definitely more, I was almost going to say an amorphous conversation, but it's not. In fact, we have a very clear discussion board in English 122 designed around academic integrity. We don't call it that. We talk about, again, pride and ownership in your work. We talk about citations. But I feel like it's a conversation that we're starting to have without some of the more pejorative lingo. We don't talk about plagiarism. We talk about academic honesty. And I feel like that kind of hopefully provides a good groundwork as we push these students further on into the programs, into their majors, developing a more nuanced sensibility about how this works.
Thank you, Nate. Something that you said in a conversation you and I had previously was that academic integrity is more than a Turnitin report. And that really resonated with me. And I think about what you just shared regarding the discussion forum and how the language that you might use with students in the introductory courses might look a little more differently than it does in a student's journey. And so thank you for sharing that. And just wanted to emphasize that was something that really stood out to me that you shared.
And sort of,
go ahead.
as we're looking at being more than the Turnitin report, there's sort of more to academic integrity that students need to understand beyond, did they plagiarize or did they not plagiarize? You know, are they using the sources in the way that those sources are meant to be used? Are they taking information outside of that source to support their point, but they're misrepresenting that information? And so there are some of those nuances, especially as students go on in their programs, that we start to look at when we're talking about academic integrity violations. So it does go beyond just what's in the Turnitin report, what was sort of copied from whatever sources they're using. Are the sources they're using, is it an appropriate use of that source? Does the source material say what the student actually says that it says? We do sometimes run into those issues where we see citations within a submission that has been submitted to the academic integrity team, and the citation has nothing to do with what the student said the citation has to do with within their paper. And so that is usually then also another layer of academic integrity, because they're not actually representing the sources as they are meant to be used.
And I like what Dr. Nate brought about, like the beginning of their journey. They're just trying to learn everything. They're trying to learn how to research, trying to, learn the new classroom. We throw a lot at them when they first begin, students here at UAGC. But as they get further along in their program, I think you start to see academic integrity might not be tied to lack of knowledge, but more outside impacts that may cause them not to critically think. And then maybe it's shortcut because it's 10 o'clock on Monday and this is due and my professor's probably not awake and I'm just going to go on Google and throw something together. So at that point, later on in their journey, we have to remember it's not lack of knowledge per se, but it might be trying to understand what happened to cause them to take a shortcut or think that that was their only option.
Yeah, I mean, that's such great background information, and I can imagine this journey of a student through their different programs and at the different levels of academic study. When students come into a doctoral program, we have an expectation that they've heard this message before: the importance of original academic work, the importance of academic integrity. And an important shift happens as students move into doctoral work. And that's that we're no longer asking them simply to report on what other people have said, but to be generators, to be creators of new knowledge. And in fact, a dissertation or applied doctoral project is just that. It's creation of new knowledge through the student's own research project. And so it's important for our doctoral students that they understand that they now own what they write and they are represented by what they write. And when you think about that, the principles of academic integrity that stipulate we give credit where credit is due to work and to researchers who have come before us is absolutely critical. We have a number of students who come right through the programs. They do their bachelor's degree, they do their master's, and they're so excited. They go ahead and they start in on a doctoral program. I have the highest expectations for those students because they've been in an academic setting over a period of time and they have heard this message. We also have a lot of students who come back to complete a doctoral degree, like I did, after I had been working for a while, and I returned to school to earn that degree. And some of those students are a little bit rusty. They're a little bit rusty on citing and correctly attributing the work of others. And that's a learning opportunity for the student, and something we coach our entry point instructors to work with students around that. But we really emphasize that it's not merely saying what others have said before, but synthesizing that information, thinking about it critically, and then being able to represent in their own words their thoughts about that particular subject. A little bit different than what we're expecting in Dr. Nate's English 102 class, where we're often pretty happy that they've cited a source to support their thinking. So those expectations do change.
Thank you, Peggy. That's very insightful. Christina, I want to double back to the comment that you made where you were talking a little bit about, kind of life happens and how the, acting with integrity in your work is important. And from your perspective, I'd like to pose the question to you to get started is, why should we care about academic honesty?
I mean, as an institution, we want our students to represent that they earned the degree. For our students, in speaking with them through the conduct process, they want to feel proud of the work that they've put out. And so very rarely are students telling me, like, trying to pull the wool over my eyes, like, no, I didn't really cheat. They're ashamed and they're embarrassed as well, because they feel like they've let themselves down. They might have let, a lot of them are motivated to do better, to get the degree, to be better role models for their kids and family. And so they feel like they've let them down as well. So I think everyone cares because we want to feel prideful about the work that we're doing. This is an investment outside of all the other responsibilities that our students have in their life that they want to feel proud of. And you don't want to cheat that. And the majority of students don't want to cheat that. They want to earn it because it will do something better for them, no matter, professionally, personally, whatever. So I think we all care about it because we want to feel prideful that we have earned this degree. We have obtained this knowledge that Peggy talks about, right? So it's important because we want to feel prideful that we've done that with integrity.
A follow-up question. Oh, sorry, Elena, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it along the lines of that feeling of pride and feeling of achievement, knowing too that they're going to take those behaviors and then act ethically when they get to that next career point. A lot of our students are working adults who are looking to advance in their career. And so engaging in these ethical behaviors here at the institution translates to the ethical behaviors that we hope they will engage in when they are out in the workforce. And so teaching them sort of along the way about how to use this information properly, while they may not be writing a research paper in their, whatever, if they're working in a or a corporation, they're not going to write that, but they are going to know that it's not correct to take credit for someone else's idea if they're working together on a team and helping them build that collaborative teamwork environment. And so it goes beyond just sort of what they're doing in the academic realm in terms of writing. It links to these other behaviors of collaboration, teamwork, giving credit where credit is due to fellow team members. And so we build those skills through modeling academic integrity.
I love that you mentioned that, Elena, because what we're actually talking about here are professional practices. So we're asking, people have a choice. to be honest or not to be honest, how they represent themselves in academics, how they represent themselves in a professional setting. And we have lots of horrific examples of people who have behaved badly in corporations. And it's typically because they made a bad choice in terms of decision making, and they lacked ethics in terms, or ethical behaviors in terms of their behaviors. So when we speak of academic integrity and who does it really hurt, I believe that as educators, we are responsible for showing people that this is part and parcel of what it is to be a well-respected and ethical practitioner, no matter where we're working.
But I want to just talk briefly. I mean, the heart of what Christina is saying is that, or for me, one thing I really take from it, I guess, is the fact that students don't always know they've done these things wrong. They don't understand the stakes, especially, again, the students I'm dealing with who are in their 4th, 5th, 6th class at the university. I think that it might seem very natural to them to sit down to work on a paper at the dinner table after everyone's gone to sleep with a deadline looming, and to grab a couple of quotes and feel like, okay, I've got the information there now. So that ladder that we create through our first-year education program into the different majors further on, that's where we really can explain, model, demonstrate why this is important in all the ethical ways that Peggy and Christina and Elena are talking about. But again, I mean, I talk to my faculty about trying to be able to differentiate between intentional and unintentional plagiarism in the classroom. But what Christina is talking about, to me, cuts so much deeper than that, because it's not intentional versus unintentional. It's just clearly not even understanding those rules yet. Maybe lacking some of that self-esteem, or maybe just not really understanding, not having good models. And so trying to bring the culture of care to that, realizing that we're dealing with people who are not out to fleece us. They're not out to steal a degree. They just don't quite grasp the stakes of this yet. And hopefully that narrative that builds in the first-year classes can help to demonstrate to them and through their work, this is who I am. This is what I'm here to do. This is what I'm trying to master. This is who I'm doing it for. And it gives them that pride. And along the way, they start to bring in these other skills, these other bits of knowledge, and it deepens their abilities. And hopefully, you know, with a little bit of guidance, they learn these things. Doesn't always work, but hopefully it does.
Well, and Nate, good point. We all have a learning curve. And while I expect doctoral students have been exposed to this kind of information before, we start our entry point class. Some years ago, I wrote a short essay on what does original academic work mean? What does it look like? What isn't it? How can you avoid common errors and problems? And it talks about, you know, just reiterating some of the basics about giving credit, about citing properly, and about, you know, using your own words to describe things. So even at the doctoral level, there's always room for reinforcing the point. And I think by not doing a gotcha, but doing a, hey, this is what it looks like. This is what the expectations are. This is what we will be looking for in your work, does, I think, soften that edge a little bit. So when we see something that isn't written appropriately or you know, cited appropriately, we can point back to some educational materials to say, hey, remember, this is what we're looking for, and this is why. So when, and this predated culture of care, Tricia, but was really about trying to not do the gotcha without the, hey, these are the expectations first, with then, gosh, go back, reread this, because these are really important. These are really important points that we need to, that you need to follow. So yeah, all along the line, our instructors have an opportunity to coach and mentor students to proper behavior.
And it's always, I say this in a lot of meetings, but our students are not us, our group that's here, when we traditionally went to college. They're us now. They're working adults. And Dr. Laura Palmer-Noon said that, in the chat just now. They're working professionals. They're older. We serve a large minority, students of color population. They have dependents. I mean, there's no way I could have been in college and law school with my two girls. There's just no way it would have happened, right? So remembering that who they are and remembering, who the UAGC student is, a very non-traditional student that can easily be impacted by life events that, again, cause them to get in these situations. So, in our conduct office, we have a new sanction. We've tried to incorporate some restorative justice in our sanctioning process. And so we have a new sanction that really, we call it a development workshop, but a section of that workshop, it's all written, is getting students to reflect on the harm to the university, to themselves, to their peers, to the public. And so when you really think about what did I, this action I did, what is the harm to all these groups of people? We hope that it makes students reflect on, at the moment, it might have seemed like the easy, right thing to do, but when you really sit down and think about it, there's a lot of harm involved in academic dishonesty to each party. To the institution, we want our degrees to be worth something. To yourself, you might feel embarrassed. To your peers, because you cheated and they may not have, and they've been working really hard. I'm really thankful for this sanction. I can't wait to assign it more. Hopefully I don't have to, because our students will act with integrity. But just remembering those things about our students, how our students are different than the normal university traditional population. That's the beginning of, integrating culture of care.
So a question for Nate and Peggy, and you've already alluded to this a little bit. How can faculty help promote a culture of care beyond maybe what you already shared? For example, Peggy, I love that you gave the example of telling students this is why what you did is not okay, and here's the why behind it. But Nate and Peggy, I'm interested in hearing any further thoughts you might have.
I could say just really quickly that I think there's a lot that faculty can do to model academic integrity in the classroom. One of the things I'm really invested in is trying to sort of decentralize the learning in the classroom. I don't want it to always be me talking about what's right and what's wrong. And so in my lectures, in my announcements, I'll be quoting from other sources. I'll be dropping in videos. I teach the English 225 class, which is Introduction to Film. Use a lot of film clips there, but a lot of quotes from different places, different sources, and I attribute them properly. In fact, I talk about why I'm using the quotes in my lecture or in my announcements. So I think having that proper citation at the bottom of your lecture, your guidance materials, if in responding on the discussion board, you lead students to another source, you're going to quote that appropriately and not just bounce out, you're going to cite it. I feel like that starts to show that, hey, here we are in an academic environment. This is how you do things here. A little different if you're sitting across from somebody at the kitchen table, a little different if you're having a conversation out at the bar with some friends. But when you're in the classroom, even though we're still online, and online can often seem very informal, I feel like when you're online in the classroom, instructors can model that. They can show that these other voices are important enough to cite properly. There's dozens of ways to do it. I know that a lot of my associate faculty have really creative and interesting ways to talk about this concept, but one thing I think matters is that literally modeling the citation, bringing in those other voices, showing how it's done in your own writing.
And that's critical. I talked to an old timer. I'll use that, in a generous and loving fashion, but a person who had taught before we had this internet thing, right? And so an instructor would read the textbook and could say, "Hey, in that paper, this sounds just like that paragraph that the author wrote." So in some ways, the explosion of access to information has made it more difficult for some of us to see when something isn't isn't original work and is in fact copied. It's interesting, Nate, when you talk about quotation, just everything changes a little bit when we get to the doctoral level, because at the doctoral level, we don't want students to quote. We want them to be owning the words that they write. So when they quote, which is entirely appropriate at a bachelor's level, I would be delighted if a student found a great quote and properly cited it. But at the doctoral level, we want people to take what they've read and turn it into their own words. So another piece of information we offer, it is an essay called "To Quote or Not to Quote," right? What's the right answer at the doctoral level? And then we explain why quoting isn't advisable at the doctoral level, and what the power of their own words really mean. So we take what you set in terms of the foundation of that role modeling, which is absolutely critical by the instructor in discussions and announcements and feedback and that kind of thing. And then we just keep pulling it forward a little further and a little further. We have dissertation chairs among our rank who won't let students quote anything in a doctoral research project, a dissertation or an ADP. And we have some chairs like me, when a student says, "Oh, but this person just said it perfectly." It's like, well, fine, use it sparingly. But so this is part of this process of moving people from we talked when we met earlier about, remember when you were in 4th grade and you did a report about Egypt, and you went to National Geographic magazine and you essentially copied the information about the pyramids right from the magazine and pasted little pictures in there. And at that level, that's okay. But through high school and into college, we want people to change that behavior just as somebody matures along the way. So our practice is, when we see what appears to be plagiarism, that we talk to the student about it, because as Christina said, sometimes it's unintentional. People don't know that they did it wrong. They say, "Oh, I have a citation." Yeah, but it's a direct quote, right? So we clarify that. And we almost always give students an opportunity to resubmit a work that shows plagiarism. So we try not to castigate them as being bad or not a good student or something, but to try to use that as the opportunity to say, here's why this doesn't work. We do have repeat offenders, though. We have students who week after week will continue to extract large portions of assignments from other work. And so, so that's when we have to kind of ratchet things down a little bit. But initially, my belief is that if it can be explained as a mistake or an honest misunderstanding, let's start with that. It's just like a student who tells you, "Oh, I can't get my paper in because my grandmother's sick." Well, you don't know if grandma's really sick, but you give that student the benefit of the doubt and you work with them because they're a human being coming to you with a problem and asking for support. We give them that support. But if grandma's sick every week, then there's a different issue at play. The same with the academic integrity. If you see repeated patterns or students not changing their behaviors, then that's when I think we need to call into play our other university resources to help us deal with that student.
Peggy, that leads me to an important question, I think, for many of us on that are part of this panel today. From your perspective, and Nate, from your perspective, is there a limit to the number of teachable moments that you should give a student? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, Peggy kind of alluded to the fact that as faculty, we're going to have a little bit of a, I don't know, is it a built-in sixth sense? We're trying to sort of figure out what's going on, right? And if someone's grandmother is sick every week, obviously, either the grandmother's in poor health or there's something else going on. And that something else is what the culture of care is designed to help support. Maybe the student doesn't want to talk about what's going on. Maybe they're homeless. Maybe their computer died. They can't afford a new one. maybe saying grandma is sick is shorthand for a variety of things that are every bit as real as an imaginary ailing grandmother. So in my circumstance, first year classes, general education classes, you know, I'm gonna have teachable moments all the time. It slows me down, it wears me out, but literally everything is a teachable moment in a first year class. There's never a moment where I allow myself to get angry, take it personal, to, kick my computer out the window. Everything is just roll up the sleeves and let's have a conversation about it. Let's talk about it. I understand that maybe my attitude toward this is a little different than some other people's, even colleagues of mine in the Academic Engagement Center, because I know that there are students who are, literally manipulating the system. I know that those students are out there. I know there are students who are intentionally cheating week after week after week, and they need that I-road, or they need one of those sanctions that Christina was talking about. But from my perspective, the reason I'm here is to help people get access to things they didn't have access to before. Written communication, for me, that's where I kind of live and breathe. So if that's my job is not to determine whether someone's grandmother is sick. My job is to just keep helping, just keep offering, just keep putting a hand out, teachable moment after teachable moment, as exhausting as it may sometimes be. So, that's the long-winded answer to your question, like how many is too many. From my perspective, what I teach now, my role here today, there can never be enough teachable moments. Everything is a teachable moment.
And I so appreciate that. I also think that by the time a student gets into a doctoral program, that latitude for, I know you're trying, keep going, it changes a little bit, Nate. And not in terms of the personal issues. I mean, when students tell me about personal issues, they can have as many personal issues. Grandma really can be sick every week or something happens. And, you see that in students. And that's our population. In terms of the academic integrity piece, though, these are skills and choices that students can make. So to Christina's point about, oh my gosh, it's 10 o'clock on Monday night, they just put something in. I've actually talked to students who submitted a whole paper that one of their friends had written. And of course it showed up, and, and I said, well, why did you do this? You're a good student. Well, I ran out of time. I said, gosh, you should have asked me. I would have been happy to give you some extra time to get the paper in. And I put right in my announcement, I say, we're all really busy. You have, those of you who play Monopoly, a get out of jail free card. You can have an unexcused late absence, no problem. Just let me know. Just if you need extra time, ask. And so I want to have that openness. But when we coach a doctoral student about original academic work and they continue to do the same behaviors, which is pretty much copy and paste, I do feel like I can't be open-ended about that. I can work with that student and help that student and allow them to resubmit the offending assignment, but then they need to meet those requirements. We do see students who have a pattern of this behavior and they'll stop it. And then when they get to the next class, remember 6 weeks with this instructor, soon Dr. Sundstrom will go away and I'll get, Dr. somebody else, and they start the same behavior again. So we actually try to do a little bit of follow up with those students and see how they're doing in their second and third classes. We had one student, and I noticed that his discussion forums had very different writing styles in them. And so I ran his discussion posts through Turnitin, and I found they were 50, 60, 90% copied right from other sources. And when I talked to him about it, he says, oh, I didn't know you checked discussion forums. I always thought you only checked assignments. So it'd be okay. I mean, he had figured out the system. He got his master's degree here at our institution. He says, that's the way I always do my discussions. And I said, well, not in this program. So he dropped and he came back, and we watched him and we followed him because he was a bright guy. He could certainly do the work, but he was taking this shortcut. And at that point, we had to really kind of stop it. It doesn't happen very often, but we do have students who we determine have copied large chunks of their dissertation or their applied doctoral project. And so if we can't educate and coach students and mentor them to the proper kinds of academic behavior before they get to that point, we sure don't want to have them turn in a dissertation and find out through a Turnitin report that it's copied from other sources. And that has happened, and it's really unhappy. So lots of care and support. I don't know I can put a number on it, Tricia, but we do try to kind of follow up to see what's happening with those students who are kind of repeat, like, yeah, I won't do it anymore, but they do it again. So I can't remember the last time I turned in an I-Road. I think it was for the student who had copied all of his discussion forums, but it's not my typical process because I would rather try to work with the student, have them, run the report, check it with me, and teach them how to use those tools. So, but it's a great question, not an easy answer.
Thank you, Nate and Peggy. And
I do want to give some context really quick, Tricia. Yes. I've been in student affairs a decade now this month. Oh my gosh. I will say in student conduct, the percentage of population that we work with, just so you guys have context, is under 1% consistently over the past decade. So, we're talking about academic integrity here, but please don't think that's all of our students. It's really not. And I will say that, to Peggy's point, in the student conduct process, which has become so much more developmental and student support focused, one of the common themes that comes up after they complete all their sanctions, they have like a conduct process completion call with the conduct officer, me or Kim, my colleague. And one of the top themes that comes up is, what are you going to do differently? I will reach out to my instructor. I will reach out to my advisor, because for whatever reason, as adults, that was a big barrier to asking for help. And so they feel empowered now that they've become more familiar with the university resources. I will ask for help now when I need it. And so that is a big thing. So a teachable moment, offer them, but realize like a lot of times our students aren't asking for help. And side note, I just want to say, with COVID, RSV, the flu, it's very likely grandma or a kid might be sick every week. I'm going on week 3. So I also, always throw that caution out there that just remember the world events. There's the plague everywhere right now.
Thank you for that context, Christina, and Nate and Peggy. I've appreciated hearing kind of what I'd like to consider the bookends of the possibility of a student's degree experience. But I'm just thinking in general, sending things to academic integrity and what support they might provide. Elena, I wonder if you can give some help and context and offer some ideas for the folks in the middle, since we haven't heard much about that.
Yeah, so in our academic integrity process, we have some great academic outreach specialists who work with students so they get the I-Roads and they start to investigate and looking at what's going on specifically in the paper. They may reach back out to an instructor to suggest a teachable moment. So sometimes submitting an I-Road doesn't necessarily mean that a student is going to be sanctioned. I think that's important because they look at every individual assignment as a unique instance. We do have sort of background information to know sort of how many I-Roads a student has received, but we really try to focus on what is going on in this assignment, in this paper. And so if it is a case where this is a case of students are poorly paraphrasing or their citations sort of aren't in the right spot, they have like a whole paragraph of things that are paraphrased, and so they put the citation at the end of that paragraph when they really needed some citations somewhere earlier in the paragraph as well. that's a moment that we can help a student better understand sort of where to do that. Is that something that we necessarily want to sanction a student for? Maybe, maybe not. Depends sort of on other things going on in the paper. We have different levels with that. We offer too, if a student has, even if a student is their first time being caught and they're given a citation, we provide them with very specific resources from the Writing Center about academic integrity, how to properly quote, how to properly paraphrase, when to summarize, and using those resources to help guide the student, both in their paper, showing them, here's where we found that you copied this work. Here's where it is specifically on a website circled for them. Here's some resources that you can use to better understand that. And that evaluation is given to every student. We also have the ability to, if they've so we ask them to fill out some things in the Writing Center. There are some Writing Center modules that help with academic integrity. So in that first level, we're going to ask students to complete those modules so that they can go through those, and completing those modules means going through those modules and getting 100% on them and letting us know that they've completed those modules. If we've reached a point where they're this seems to be a pattern, they're escalating, coaching sessions, one-on-one half-hour coaching session with our academic outreach specialist and the student, so they can sit down and have that conversation about what's going on, like what happened that sort of led to this level of academic integrity. And like Christina said, a lot of times it boils down to a time management situation where they were just running out of time. They went to Google, they went to Course Hero, they went to Study Pool, any number of those online tutoring sites, quote unquote tutoring sites, and downloaded a paper and submitted it. And so talking to the students then about what are things that we can do to help you manage your time? What are some strategies that you can use to better research and manage your time as you're doing your research and taking those notes? And so having that conversation with a student one-on-one, and hopefully then that puts sort of a stop in the process so that we don't go to the next highest level, in which we are referring them to Christina's office in student conduct. So we really try to be developmental in our sanctions as we're going through to help students better understand the process. If an instructor, if it's not something that is necessarily a teachable moment, that an instructor should work with the student in that classroom. And so we're working very hard within our culture of care to develop more resources and more avenues for students, because we also understand students learn differently. And so sometimes it takes them sometimes some time to process what they see in the written feedback, and maybe they need that video that explains what they're doing, or they need that one-on-one conversation about this. And so looking at additional ways that we can support our students sort of through this process so that we get them back on track, because we don't want a sanction or something coming from academic integrity to deter them from continuing with their degree program. We want them to learn and continue, and we don't want them to be discouraged. And so looking at ways we can help them and support them to get back on track is especially important in that middle bit between early bachelor's and doctoral.
Thanks, Elena. That brings up an important question that I know the five of us have talked about, is what is the impact to the student when they go through the academic integrity process? And I'm thinking a lot about the keynotes we've had over the last couple of days, and particularly Clint Smith's keynote earlier this morning is how does that experience impact the student? And would love to hear from the five of you. And I guess my follow-up question to that then too is, how after they go through the academic integrity process, can we ensure the student gets back on track? Because as you mentioned, Elena, we want them to be successful and want to help develop them as a learner and as a professional.
Yeah, and I'll just start sort of with the end in mind.
Yes.
Our doctoral students are going to be conducting a research process, and it's absolutely critical that they conduct those research projects under ethical guidelines and under really strict guidelines to protect their participants and protect the integrity of the data, protect the identity of the people who are working with them. And so this idea of their personal academic integrity feeds directly into their responsibilities as a student researcher in terms of their integrity during the research process, working with real life participants, real life people for most of our students, and the integrity of that data that they collect and analyze and report. So it's really a continuum, but that's our end goal, is that we end up with ethical researchers. So I'll stop there and let other people jump in, but I want to make that point that ultimately that's our goal, is that we have people who are practicing ethical research.
And I guess from my perspective in the classroom, if I am having a conversation with a student because of something they did in a paper, let's say in week 2 in one of my classes, 100% across the board, it's an eye-opening experience for the student. And they become so much more receptive. I mean, I feel like I've in decades of teaching, I've had maybe 3 or 4 instances where a student got defensive, shut off, and never heard from them again. In every other case, so I guess that's not 100%, right? My math isn't so good. 97% across the board, when I have a conversation like this with a student, they're grateful. They want to exactly know how they can improve. What did they do wrong? How can they do better? And they become super communicative. They become, and I don't think they're compensating. I think they just really have that moment where they're like, okay, clearly I did something wrong. I've jeopardized this future that we've all been talking about today on the panel. I've jeopardized this path that I'm on. Now I've got to really open myself up and take that learning, take that knowledge. And we have great conversations from that point on. So to me, it always feels icky and becomes very positive.
Christina, I know you have a lot to share about this. So I want to make sure you have an opportunity.
I agree a lot with what Dr. Nate said, that especially, well, first off, I got to give kudos to Elena's team, because we have seen a huge decrease in the number of academic integrity cases referred to our office. And that's only because of that developmental work on the front end of the academic integrity team to offer these coaching sessions, which I've had many students compliment Dr. Michael Robinson on his approach with them. And then just the modules I put in the chat, they're very helpful, whether done in the academic integrity process or with student conduct. Students always tell me like the paraphrasing ones were the most helpful or whatnot. For those who don't know, when students are referred to student conduct for academic integrity violations, they are actually unscheduled from courses. That break really gets them to engage in our process. And we work with them every step of the way through sanction completion and whatnot. And so students really do, like Dr. Nate said, they want to move forward with pride and not having this happen again. And often in that conduct completion appointment I'll have with them, I'll jokingly say, this is the point where I tell you, I don't want to talk to you anymore, right? And we laugh, but I tell them, I am another extension of support here at the university. And all I want them to walk away with from our process is to know you are supported. We all care about your success. We all want to see you graduate. And they really take that to heart. And hopefully through going through conduct, they won't be back again. And our recidivism rate has dropped very substantially. Our separations from the university has decreased so much. We only had 2 expulsions last year. And so it's just, students do want to move forward, but to get them back on track, we have to really engage with them as a human on the other side of that interaction, understand their situation and what sanctions or what support can we offer them to help them move forward to not do this again and not feel like this was the only option. Right? The only option was to go to Google and just put that in my paper, right? So that's my 2 cents. maybe 1.5.
I want to double back because I recognize there's a lot of staff here today as well. We talked about things that the faculty can do in the classroom to promote a culture of care, but I also recognize that the non-academic student experience when students are in college is equally important for learning. And I'm wondering, Christina and Elena, from your perspectives, any advice you might have for staff to help promote a culture of care as it relates to academic integrity?
I think just being there for them, again, they walk away from conduct saying, I will reach out to my advisor, I'll reach out to instructor, even simple things. Did you ask the instructor for help? Being versed in the support procedures we have for students through tuition credit requests, the academic resolution process, the resolution center, is there something else that could help them? And just remembering that, again, that's a human on the other side, and understanding their situation a little bit, spending that time with them to really see how can we help them move forward. Elena?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to just echo that in terms of seeing the whole person and having that conversation. I think the other thing we can do as staff, because sometimes as staff, we're creating resources for students. And so we can sometimes feel a time crunch and do the Google thing and see what others are saying about this, or finding a resource that we like online that maybe we adapt and make our own, but making sure that we're providing that credit to that original source of the information. And so making sure we're modeling that in all of the resources that we provide our students, so that they know, they see this not only in their classroom from their instructors, they see this from all facets of the university, to really emphasize the importance of giving credit where credit is due. And so making sure that we're engaged in those processes as well. And not always just for things that students see, things that we see with each other, that we just do internally. If we're doing this here, that sort of sets the tone of ethical behavior that permeates the organization. And so making sure stuff that maybe other students don't see, but another university might see, that, we create documents constantly that go to accrediting bodies, that go to external reviewers for different things. And so making sure that everything that we're putting in there, we're abiding by the same academic integrity standards that we expect of our students, and sort of all of that. Because because a student may not hear about it directly in the classroom or see it, but maybe they'll hear about it from somebody else who had that interaction, who saw something that maybe wasn't given credit where it should have been. And so making sure that what we're doing meets those standards is especially important, because word of mouth is one of the ways we generate our reputation. And so we don't want to sort of tarnish that outside of that community, just beyond our students.
Thanks, Elena. We're almost at time, but want to offer for Nate and Peggy to have the final word on any thoughts as we wrap up our time together. Oh, come on. I think I can unmute you. There you go, Nate.
I would just say that I value the support that we have here at the university. Elena and Christina are talking about a lot of different supports and processes behind the scenes. I think it's great that I can have a conversation with a student about these important issues, and I can know that their advisor is going to chime in with the same message, that if they eventually do get through Elena's process and get to Christina, it's going to be that same message. And I really value teaching here that we've established this culture of care, which seems so obvious. But now that we've articulated it, now that we've committed to it, I feel like that makes me feel better in the classroom, to know that there aren't mixed messages about these things. What is academic integrity, honesty to me is the same thing to everybody else. There isn't really a sliding scale when it comes to that. So that's really helpful to me in the classroom, and I appreciate that.
And I have to give a shout out. Our doctoral programs are lucky that we have doctoral program advisors. So we have 3 excellent advisors who work with our students. And I always feel comfortable, as Nate said, that we're getting that same message. And it's often easier for a student to call their advisor than it is to call the professor. Even if the professor says, please call me, text me, I love you, come help, it's easier sometimes to go to the advisor who can then facilitate that conversation. So we do need the whole village. That's what it takes to produce a successful student. So thanks for those of you who put this panel together and the opportunity to share my thoughts. I've really enjoyed it.
And thank you all. And we're at the top of the hour. Appreciate your presence and participation, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.